Broadcast Amsterdam.
Welcome to Broadcast Amsterdam, not a stranger to the station, Matt Carney.
Hey, Kathy. Good to be here.
You? Yes. Now, I saw on your social media that you've been busy launching something called Knap House. Can you tell us what it is?
Yeah, it is a queer culture consultancy and talent house, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it is I guess it started 12 months ago. I started to think about my, I guess where am I in culture and what is my role in culture?
Yeah.
Because I've worked in advertising for many years with many different brands, and I wanted to start thinking about how I could focus on where I can add value to the industry.
Yes, yeah. Like rather than just start up another kind of generic ad agency or consultancy, what makes your knowledge or your experience special? But also, I suppose, is there a gap in the market, a need for this?
I feel there is. I feel like there is a huge movement towards being way more inclusive in the advertising industry.
Yeah.
So I was looking at it through that lens, because it is, like I said, value for me is making a space where we all feel represented, and I identify as queer. So that was the link between what part of culture made sense for me to focus on versus just being, like you said, like a broader general space.
Uh-huh.
So
I had a question for you. When you say queer, does it mean the same thing as LGBTQ?
Good question. Yeah, I think queer is something which has been defined and changed a lot over the years. My understanding is my feeling of queer is gender and sexuality is quite fluid, and it's a spectrum, and it's non-binary in a lot of ways. So I identify in a space where we don't need to define ourselves on kind of fixed gender, sexuality, and sex.
Oh, cool. So it's kind of open to everyone if people are open-minded.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel like it's a very inclusive word.
Yeah.
It's been kind of taken back by the community to being something positive. It's anyone in that space what can identify as queer, and you can even be straight and queer.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I'm feeling from that, which just kind of blows my mind.
Yeah.
And that does feel like a very new thing. Rather than putting people in boxes, you're really kind of like opening up the box or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it's just a really powerful space. I feel like it's a progressive way of looking at culture and how we define ourselves within it.
Yeah. So that's where it fits culturally and everything. But Matt, it's a business, I presume. It's part of your professional life. So how are you going to make money from this?
Yeah. I think I am approaching it, of course, as a business, but primarily I'm approaching it as an initiative and a platform. Uh-huh. So it's called Knap House, which means handsome house. And
right. I was wondering about that.
It has a nod to almost kind of the house, like you have drag houses, and in the LGBTQ plus community, there are kind of the performative side, where like the nightlife and where the culture really thrives in a performative way. The idea of a house was kind of the start of calling it Knap House. It's an initiative and platform because what I want to do is connect the advertising production houses who produce content, which is representing queer people. And what I want to do is connect them with talent.
Yes.
My community is increasingly more queer, and there's just so much amazing queer talent in Amsterdam that I feel like they're often already used by production and creative houses to create content. And I say used sounds like tokenism, and sometimes it is, because it's the talent is brought into the production process sometimes too late, and sometimes it plays into stereotypes.
Right.
And sometimes they don't get the voice and the authenticity they deserve.
Yeah.
So I want to bridge that. So there is a business part of that, of course, but I really want to start off by contributing back to the industries by maybe producing a piece of research or a piece of content which will shed light on what's happening in queer culture. So an educational piece, but which is also really engaging as well.
Yeah.
And then as I look further towards, going into more of a business model, that's where I will have consultancy fees and talent management and even research groups, get a group of queer people together in a room and people can test out ideas.
Yes.
And anything creative which is trying to be queer inclusive and get like a temperature test.
Yeah, I see now. So yeah, that's the long-term strategy and vision for what is possible with this agency. And I like that. So yeah, I'm hearing like the talent management side coming through quite a lot, which is different, very different, I think, from what you had been doing before in advertising. Is that right?
Yeah, and I guess the story also kind of, I feel like there was 3 key areas which connected to make Knap House. One, as I mentioned, is experience in the advertising branding world. Another one is my identity as queer, but the other one is me as an actor.
Oh, yes.
So my experience in the casting process, my experience being on set and in productions.
Which you know that world.
I know that world, and I know the way it can be more inclusive.
Yeah.
And it's, I guess the enemy of all of this is when things are a bit too heteronormative, actually. And I think sometimes the way things are categorised, talent and stereotyping happens a lot in the talent management side, from my experience.
Yes.
So I feel like I also want to almost shed light on a way of doing talent management which has more meaning and authenticity to the talent. And it's not just about aesthetics and a look.
Yeah.
It's, the thing, like a miss would be, we want some queer talent, let's get someone with tattoos and piercings.
Yes, yeah.
Which that kind of happens because it's like, oh, we want someone who looks edgy and kind of, but I think there's just, that doesn't allow the full representation of the queer experience.
Like you say, there's a spectrum,
Yeah.
and it's nice, it's you know, people should understand that and it come through in the casting. You're right. I think Knap House seems like a really good fit with Amsterdam. How much, though, do you think of this as a local initiative, or could it be something with global influence, do you think?
Good question. Yeah, I want to start with Amsterdam because it feels like I want to build something quite community and local focused. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like that is the world I know. I have been here 10 years. I don't feel like I know other cities well enough to maybe be there on the ground building these kind of relationships. Because I'm all about going and having coffees with everyone and kind of in nightlife before Corona times. It was about being out there and building like relationships organically in queer spaces. Mm-hmm. So I know the queer spaces in Amsterdam. That's where I've spent my time. And then if I've been to festivals, I went to a festival in February, for example, which was a queer festival in Mexico. Oh, yeah. And that's where I really got inspired and felt a real sense of belonging to a more, that was quite a US focused and Mexican focused queer community who I'm still close with, and I would love to bring them into Knap House eventually, because these are just really amazing performers and amazing people.
Okay, first Amsterdam, second Mexico, and then we'll see what comes. But you're right, it's where your connections are.
Yeah.
So that feels natural. But so then when did you discover the performative queer space then in Amsterdam? How did you just kind of... Yeah, did you know you were getting yourself into this space at the time?
It's funny because Amsterdam started to... I think it's always had a thriving nightlife scene, and there's always been queer safe spaces. I started to go to some techno nights, which were more queer focused. So I met a lot of people and discovered like DJs were often programmed who were queer, and then you get performers coming out into the dance floor at certain points, and that's kind of nightlife. And then in terms of my experience in performing, I often did projects with artists who were coming from like the Rietveld Academy and the the Rijks Academy, sorry. Yeah. And a lot of the artists I was working with were using, sometimes deliberately, sometimes accidentally, kind of queer talent who were representing maybe an energy which was a little bit more fluid. And I think through performing in these more conceptual pieces, that's again attracts the weird fishes. It's kind of what people who are a little bit more on they are queer and they are challenging gender norms in their day-to-day life. And that just always, I gravitated to that naturally, maybe my own curiosity. And like I said, I've always been kind of working in this kind of cultural strategy space. So I just find I've naturally had a curiosity in that for my own identity. And then you attract like-minded people, right? So I'd say it's through nightlife, through being in the performance art space. Uh-huh. And yeah, Amsterdam just being quite quite a good city to easily find these queer spaces.
Yeah. Well, you love the nightlife, and that's the way in. I wouldn't probably discover it myself because I never go clubbing anymore. But that's it. You can come across that from if you go out a lot. Then in Amsterdam, you're bound to come across some of these, queer performative things going on in the spaces.
Yeah.
However, with the coronavirus, isn't that affecting things quite a lot?
It has, and I think a lot of queer people have found community through online video parties and sometimes more intimate virtual settings.
Yeah.
And I think they've been really at the forefront of being able to harness their creativity through using video cams.
Yes, yeah.
Doing bedroom performances. I know a lot have switched to even OnlyFans and things like that. Just finding new ways to be expressive with themselves, their sexuality and performative side.
Would you say, like, when this kind of culture gets back into the clubs and the clubs are open up, is it the sort of thing everyone can just experience and taste, or would you say it's a bit more exclusive? Like, how would you know you're going to a queer night? And, is it accessible for everyone? Yeah,
I think it's the whole ethos of being queer is that you have been made to feel different at some point and you've been othered by society. So then it's finding spaces where you can feel powerful and feel invited and feel safe within a space. So as long as I think it's when someone who maybe doesn't identify as queer or they're not part of the LGBTQ plus experience, then I think it's just having a sense of I'm coming to enjoy and I'm coming to connect and I'm coming to educate or educate yourself and get a sense of it. But I think it's not about going and maybe being there to other people and to stir and to mock. I think it's being there with a positive, open mindset. And I think that's where the difference is. So everyone's always invited, and I think the queer community is beautifully inclusive, and it's all about having empathy for other people's experiences. I just remember back in the day with my friend in London, and I was so disappointed because there were some gay clubs that we tried to go to and we were turned away at the door. And I felt like, then it's kind of put me off. Like, I felt like I can't go there or not, but it's not true. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's certain door policies where they want people to bring almost a quite extra version of themselves and have a vibe. So it's kind of make an effort to join the party in a way of celebrating your identity. Not as an observer. And I think it's also, it varies a lot, and there is exclusivity within the queer community, and that's something which it's always going to exist. I think whatever community you look at, there's always going to be a certain moment where you want to bring it a bit closer and then form a tighter community. And that's okay sometimes. Oh, wow. And then let's see, what are you going to do? What are your next steps? How are you going to launch something? It's a bit difficult with the coronavirus, perhaps, but what are your plans to bring Knap House and get it, people to know about it? Yeah, well, I'm working with a researcher at the moment because I want to really keep with this ethos of adding and contributing back to culture. So I'm working with a researcher to come up with, we want to dive into a question about queer culture, which maybe everybody or a certain target group we're thinking about would want to know. So it could be, for example, we could do something like a guide to working with queer talent for production houses. Yeah, totally. That could be something. And we do it very visually, and we make it a very kind of engaging piece of content, which is useful, and it can get shared around the Amsterdam production house community. Alternatively, we could go a bit more artistic and have maybe some kind of collaboration with queer photographers who are really almost in a photojournalistic way documenting queer life. And that could be a exhibition with a magazine with useful information and insight on what is the real queer experience that we don't always get to see, because there's the mainstreaming of queer, and then there's the underground kind of the makers, the doers, the ones who are grassroots, who are always kind of starting new expressions of queer experience, and then it surfaces to the top eventually, like most trends and So that's where we are at the moment, and I'm just working on that piece of whatever it'll be, content or material.
And overall, you're representing the queer community in the way that you understand how business works, because you also know how the ad agencies and the big companies will have their strategy and agenda and their objectives. And matching those up, because there's probably nothing worse than if you get involved in a project as a creative or as a performer and then you think you feel used or something. So I suppose you will be wanting to just stop that happening.
Yeah. I think around July, August every year when it's Pride, and especially Amsterdam, all of the brands start to think about how do they make a Pride campaign. And there's been so much change in the way of approaching that, and not just being gay for a day or not just pinkwashing or putting rainbow flags on products. So there's been a huge educational shift. I think brands and agencies are really well versed now on how to be more inclusive year round. But I know I'm looking towards the beginning of next year. I am hoping that Knap House can start to thrive a bit in that space, because it's when a lot of the brands and companies are starting to think about tapping into creating some activation or campaign around Pride.
Yeah, well, you've got a year to do it. That's all right. It's a shame that we couldn't have Gay Pride this summer, but it'll come back with a bang, hopefully, in August. In 2021. That's it. But yeah, congratulations for you. You've got a lot of guts to set up something like this, starting off from, Knap House Queer. That's the website. Oh, go and tell everyone. You can tell everyone.
Oh yeah, it's knaphousequeer.com. You can find my information on there if anyone wants to get in touch. And Instagram, knap.house. I do a thing called Knap Chats.
Oh yeah.
So, I've spoken to a few queer amazing people, and I just have a chat with them and ask them a question which is quite open, like what are your thoughts on queer, and I get a bit of a soundbite insight into the kind of view on it. So Knap Chats. So my Instagram handle is I'm putting content out there already. Yeah,
great. No, that's good. So people can. It's not just a holding page. Yeah. There's stuff there, so you can find out much more about what Matt's doing with Knap House.
Broadcast Amsterdam. Broadcast Amsterdam, your local radio station, 24/7 and on demand. Or on broadcastamsterdam.nl.